When did you not just dodge a bullet, but evade a full-on ballistic missile strike? When I moved back to New Orleans in 2004, I looked at two different apartments, A and B. I ended up choosing B because it was a little bit larger. I lived there for about 5 weeks and the neighbors were horrendous and management wouldn't do anything about it, so I went back to the other place to see if apartment A was still available. It wasn't, but they had another one downstairs in the building next door. So I ended up moving again, into apartment C. Apartment B flooded several feet in Katrina. Apartment A had the roof ripped off. Apartment C, where I had lived for a year, was fine. I cannot overstress how difficult my life would have been if my apartment had been damaged. Not even taking into account my belongings, it was damn near impossible to find anywhere to live for years after Katrina. It's not an exaggeration to say that if my apartment had been damaged, the entire trajectory of my life probably would have changed. I had leukemia when I was a kid. I was given a pretty low chance of survival. I got diagnosed the day after my 6th birthday and went into remission when I was 12. When I turned 14, they told me it wouldn't come back, but if it ever did, I would have the worst headache I've ever had in my life. I don't really understand the headache part. I joke that I pulled one over on the Make-A-Wish people. They sent me to Disneyland, but I didn't end up dying, so I kinda screwed them on that deal. I was riding my motorcycle, not too fast. There was a nice spring breeze, so I had my visor open. Then I just randomly decided to close it. As soon as my visor clicked down, I saw a small but sturdy branch fall out of a tree, smacked right into my visor and bounced off. A friend in HS offered to pick me up and sneak out for a party. I was in the middle of a WoW raid and declined. Then it turned out he hit a tree and died from drunk driving. Had just finished a regular meeting I was the host of when one of my fiends said, "Hey, you don't look good." I told him I didn't feel great and was going to go home. He said, "Nah, I'm taking you to the document." We go to the clinic, military, and after an extremely brief exam, he turns to my friend and says take him to the ER and tell them it's his appendix. Less than an hour later I was in surgery. Thing is, I had just come back from a dive weekend where I did 2 days of boat dives 4 hours out in the Red Sea. Multiple dives were below 100 feet. If my appendix had decided to give out a day earlier, I'd probably die. I was in a coma. Didn't look like I'd come out of it. They had the talk with my wife about letting me go. She said no. Thanks, wife. Edit, this blew up. Attaching a video my wife made of the first year of my recovery, starts about a week after I came out of the coma. It was a catastrophic stroke. Our gas range in the kitchen malfunctioned. It was leaking natural gas all night. CO detector never went off. I woke up the following morning, walked downstairs, and smelled it. It was so thick of gas you could taste it. Quickly opened all of the doors/windows and vacated. We waited about an hour before going back in. It was windy out, so it cleared out quickly. Inspected everything, replaced the stove, and went on with the day. Nighttime came around and I went to take a shower, but there wasn't any hot water. Turns out, for some unknown reason, the pilot light on the hot water tank was out and likely had been out all night. Had it not been out, my house would have been a crater and I wouldn't be typing this. 9/11. I was living in Carroll Gardens at the time, a little bit south of the Brooklyn Bridge, and I was commuting via bike. Normally, I'd wake up around 8 o'clock, get my stuff together and ride up Smith Street and go over the Brooklyn Bridge. I'd buy a few dozen Krispy Kreme donuts from their location in WTC for my team and then ride down to Wall Street where I worked. That particular Tuesday, I overslept my alarm and had to take the subway in. I would have been at WTC right at the time of the first impact, but instead was on the subway. I actually was walking up out of the Wall Street subway stop right as the second plane was coming in and was able to see a little of the fireball and hear the citywide scream. In high school, my friend knocked on my door and tried to get me to come out and hang at night and my mom refused to let me go out with them. I was mad about it until I learned that there was 4 other people hiding behind trees that were going to jump me that night. Apple Watch said my pulse oxygen was 70 and to seek immediate medical attention. COVID ICU, plus blood clots and lungs. I'd had died in my sleep if I hadn't gotten up. Hung out with my high school boyfriend one afternoon, and we started hearing sirens when he was getting ready to leave. He looked me dead in the eyes to tell me he better get back home and make sure they hadn't found her. Well, they had. He was arrested on his walk home, because he'd tried to kill his mother and left her in their apartment hoping she'd bleed out. She'd told him earlier he couldn't come see me until he'd finished his homework, and that was apparently the last straw for him, so he attacked, then shoved her down a flight of stairs. Obviously he went to jail, and I didn't have to hear or see from him for several years. He always had some issues, but it was a shocking jump from school authority problems to attempted murder. When I was 17, I was going out with a girl from school. We smoked a little bit of hash. She was a lifeguard at a swimming pool. Her boss was a creepy guy in his late 20s who had a thing for my girlfriend. He found out we were going to a party and told the police that I was some major drug dealer. He gave the address of the party. At the last minute we decided not to go. We cooked dinner for her mom and stayed in and watched TV, smoked a joint in the garden. The party got raided, 2 vans full of police. All they got was a couple of underage drinkers. Edit 1. How did we know he was the snitch? He told one of the lifeguards who told someone who told my girlfriend. 2. No, I wasn't a drug dealer, but... Full disclosure, my girlfriend was supplying me in this instance. High school. I was hanging out with some buddies, and some guys I knew drove up. Since they knew we played tennis, they offered to sell us some top-notch rackets at low prices. We were curious, so we went outside to look at what they had to offer, and indeed, the rackets were top-notch and so brand new they still had the security tags on them. We declined. Turned out they had robbed a sporting goods store and shot a couple of clerks in the process. I was walking to high school when I was 15. I had to cross a pretty busy boulevard at uncontrolled crosswalk. I often had to wait a bit for traffic to stop. As I got to the crosswalk, a minivan in the closest lane stopped fairly early. I considered jogging so that she didn't have to wait long, but decided to keep walking. As I stepped into the second lane, a little Dodge Dakota blew through the lane at about 50 miles per hour. The side mirror left a scuff on my jacket. I just stood there. I looked at the van driver, and she was peeking through her hands. The adrenaline vibrated me the rest of the way to school. Avoided a school shooting. The prof was kinda lazy, since the lesson after the one we were having was right before Christmas. So he asked us if we are going to attend, since some people skip the lessons before Christmas to go home if they have families outside of the city the uni is in. Enough people raised their hands, so the professor cancelled the lesson. So I, and some other people, managed to avoid the building that was later shot up. Some time before we would normally have the lecture, we would likely be waiting in the library or in the hallways. Many people died. I was in ROTC in college on a scholarship with hopes to become an Army officer. I was kicked out of the program my junior year of college because I failed 2 PT tests in a row. I was kicked out on September 13, 2001, 2 days after September 11th. Of course I was absolutely gutted and had to figure out what to do next with my life. But all my friends in the program had multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, and some of them didn't make it back. So in the end, things worked out for the best. The girl I was seeing wasn't interested in being an Army wife and is upfront about how she probably would have broken up after college. But instead, we've been married 18 years and have 2 awesome sons. I dated a girl and just never felt right. I thought she was lying about being on birth control, so I always used protection and broke things off quickly after that. A few years later, I saw her mugshot on the news, and it turns out she had gotten pregnant with twins, gave birth in her home and murdered them. Those could have been my kids, and it saddens me she would do something like that. I briefly talked to an older man a while back. It never went anywhere other than him letting me try some nose candy and some flirting. He asked me to be his GF like a day into it. I respectfully said no. He did not like that. I've had to move twice and change my number because this guy just kept finding me after I blocked him. Turns out he's a pimp and he already had customers lined up, he was just trying to get me doped up enough to let him take advantage of me. I'm miles away now, but that was probably one of the scariest experiences of my life. I literally dodged a barrage of bullets and survived 2 IED attacks. My husband had an urgent feeling to take me AMA out of one major hospital to the one where my neurosurgeon was. It saved my life. They said I'd have been dead in about 12 hours. Shout out to UTSW Dr. Bruce Mickey, Dr. Jonathan White and everyone in the neuro ICU, I've been there way too many times. When Vasily Alexandrovich Arkhipov didn't turn the third key on that Soviet submarine and start WW3.